get a lot accomplished today. I got to prune 10 out of our 11 fruit trees on the property because the next 6 days we're expecting to have rain. So today is my only time, my only open window, and I need to get them pruned before they start breaking buds. And this is February 8th, 2018, so it's definitely time to get them pruned. This video is going to be jam-packed with information, so get ready. There are basically 3 common fruit tree training systems. We're going to go over each one. I'm going to give you the bullet points, and then I'm going to demonstrate on a tree how we prune for that particular training system. First up is the open vase. The open vase system is exactly like it sounds. If you think about a vase, it's short and it's wide. The upside to open vase pruning is that it's the easiest to do, and your fruit hangs relatively low to the ground, so it's easy to harvest. The downside of it is that the branches, the lateral branches, are weaker somewhat than the other types of pruning systems, and so therefore when it's heavy laden with fruit, you often need to support the branches so that they don't break. Examples of trees that like this system are peach, figs, nectarines, plums, olives, pomegranates, and almond trees. This is one of 2 peach trees we have on the property, and actually it is a grafted tree with 4 different varieties of peaches on it. And that's really great for a couple of reasons. First, the harvest. You're not harvesting all of your peaches at once because each of them harvest at a different period of time. And secondly, we are rather limited, even though we have a large property, we're still limited on space because of our sunlight constraints. So with a grafted tree, most peach trees all need another tree to pollinate. They're not self-pollinating. So with the grafted tree, it's pollinated all in one tree. The cross-pollination happens between the 4 different types. So that helps us with the sunny spots and the lack of space. Open vase training system, the trunk or the central leader is short. You have 3 or 4 major scaffolding branches off of the trunk at a 45-degree angle, and then 3 or 4 branches off of each tier or scaffolding branch. So let's take a closer look at this tree. As you can see, the trunk is right at 2 feet, which is what you want in the open vase system. And off of that, you want to have 3 to 4 lateral branches that are going to be your scaffolding branches. You need to have them at about a 45-degree angle. Now this tree was grafted, so it was already grafted to have that angle, which was nice, easy. I didn't have to use a spreader or anything like that to create it to be closer to a 45. In terms of the spacing of the scaffolding branches, if you think about looking at the tree from a bird's eye view, imagine a clock. The ideal scaffolding branches are at 12 o'clock, 3 o'clock, 6 o'clock, and 9 o'clock. You don't want the scaffolding branches to be stacked on top of each other. And as you can see with these scaffolding branches, if you can imagine looking from a bird's eye view, that's exactly the way they grafted them. 12, 3, 6, and 9. Now this tree has been here since 2015, so the pruning on this tree is not going to be like a newer tree. But I will show you from start to finish how to do the open vase on another tree, a plum tree we have down below that's been neglected in terms of pruning. On this tree, I'm going to be pruning with 2 different kinds of cuts, a heading cut and a thinning. The heading cuts consist of cutting back the terminal portion of a branch to a bud. These are done on the scaffolding branches with an outward facing bud. And then the thinning cuts is where you have complete removal of a branch back to a lateral or to a main trunk. let's start with the heading cuts on a scaffolding branch. Let's start with this one right here. Now, first off, in the center, this little stem is dead. So that's one of the first things you want to do, is look at anything that is diseased or dead, and you want to remove it. The other thing on these scaffolding branches, now we have some bigger branches coming off the scaffolding branch, and they're starting to get pretty tall. You want to keep it lower to the ground. So on these, you're going to want to remove anywhere from 1/3 up to 1/2 of the branch. And you want to pick an outward facing bud, because you don't want the shoot to grow back in toward the tree. The idea is to bring it outward. So, trimming off about 1/2 of it, and here's my outward facing bud. This one's inward, so I don't want to prune it there. I'm going to cut at a slant right above the bud. Looking at this branch off this scaffolding branch, this is an outward facing. It's got a nice little spur here, and it will be producing fruit. This one's facing out as well, but I'm going to cut it right there. Now, an example of a thinning cut. An example of a thinning cut would be this here, where we want to take it all the way back to the lateral. You see there is a collar there. You don't want to cut into the collar and damage the collar. You also don't want to cut so far out that you leave a stub. So get as close to the collar as you can and trim it. Well, this peach tree is good to go, so let's move on down to one of the plum trees that needs some heavy structural pruning. Well, we're here at the plum tree that has absolutely no open vase structure to it. This was planted closer to the springtime 2 years ago. And then last year, in the winter, right in this time, well, how do I put this? Life is what happens while you're busy making plans. My mother-in-law was in and out of the hospital with Alzheimer's, and we lost her last March. But in the process of changing all our gardens to RGGS with 120 buckets, the fruit trees kind of just didn't get pruned in January and February, so basically let it go. So now it's time to correct that, and it's going to be drastic. So let's go through the steps again for the open vase. Step 1, the trunk. You want the trunk to be somewhere between your knee and your waist, usually around 2 feet off the ground. In addition to that, you need to have 3 to 4 buds or 3 to 4 existing laterals at 45-degree angles preferably, and preferably, remember the clock, bird's eye view, at opposite ends of the quadrants and not on top of each other. So, let's examine this tree a little bit, and we'll make a decision here where we're going to cut. Looking at the trunk size, I could come way down here and make my cut, and I've got several laterals to choose from, but some of them are kind of crossing over each other. They're not at a really good angle. I'm definitely going to have to train them and use a spreader, which I'll show you that in a moment. So I think I'm going to cut up here, right at this point. I'm going to keep a good hold on the upper portion of this tree right here, because I do not want to tear the bark. So right here, I'm going to make a slanted cut. Looking at it from this side, you can see the slant, which will keep water from penetrating. It will roll off when it rains. Okay, the next step is to pick the 4 laterals that I want to keep, and to make sure I don't get mixed up, I'm going to take some ribbon and I'm going to tie it around the 4 laterals that are keepers. All right, I have them marked. So now I'm going to make header cuts, cutting off all the way back to the trunk, the laterals that are non-essential. Now we want to look at the laterals and we want to make heading cuts. These are pretty long, they're all different lengths, so I want to get them in better shape. Again, I want to look for an outward facing bud and cut right above it on a slant. Okay, I mentioned that if you have a branch that you like, that's a scaffolding branch that is less than 45 degrees, like this one is, you can use a spreader. Now this trunk is so large that I can't use something small like a clothespin, that would never hold it. So you want to make a sling out of burlap. So we're going to wrap the trunk with burlap, and then we're going to tie some string around that. The reason you want to use burlap is so that you do not girdle the tree limb. Going to pull it to the desired angle. Tie it off to your rock. And now we have a manageable plum tree. Next up is the second common fruit tree training system. Let's go down below where we have some more fruit trees and I'll show you that one.